Hi everyone, lesson 110, using the quadratic formula. We've been preparing to use the quadratic formula by doing different parts in different lessons, when we were completing the square, when we were factoring a trinomial, when you're graphing using your graphing calculator to find the zeros. When you were using the graphing calculator to find the zeros, you were actually finding the x values using the quadratic formula. So we're going to be practicing using the quadratic formula as another way to solve for x. This slide here, you can see how they came up with the quadratic formula. You start off with it in standard form, which is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And then they just solved for x. And you can see on the right-hand side the whole process of solving for x. I'm not going to go through it in detail on how you do that. You can always refer to that. Our main purpose is just being able to use the quadratic formula to find our x. Let's look at an example here. Solve a quadratic equation in standard form. Again, you're just going to use your a, your b, and your c. Remember, your x term is your a, your b term is in front of your plain x, and your c is your integer. So example 1a, use the quadratic formula to solve 2x squared plus 6x plus 4 equals 0. 2 is our a, 6 is our b, and 4 is our c. So let's plug those into our equation. So the opposite of our b is 6 plus or minus the square roots of b, so 6 squared is 36, minus 4 times a, 2, times c, which is 4, all divided by 2a, which is 2 times 2. If I were to simplify this, I have negative 6 plus or minus 36 minus 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 4 is 32. 36 minus 32 is 4. The square root of 4 is 2. And I have to divide all that by 4. So what are my x terms going to be? When you have fractions and you need to simplify it, you need to simplify the numerator before you can divide by the denominator. So a negative 6 plus 2 is a negative 4. Negative 4 divided by 4 is a negative 1. Negative 6 minus 2 is a negative 8. Negative 8 divided by 4 is a negative 2. So these are your two solutions to that equation. You may do the second one yourself for extra practice. Example 2a, rearranging the quadratic equation before solving. So I need to put it into standard form. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 32 to both sides. And when I do that, now I need to rearrange everything. So the x squared first, minus 18x, and then plus 32 equals 0. And I can label my a's. So this is your a, this is your b, this is your c. Now let's plug them into the formula. So x equals the opposite of our b, which is a negative 18, plus or minus the square root of our b, which is negative 18, squared, minus 4 times a, 1, times b, c, is 32, all divided by 2a, so 2 times 1. Now we need to simplify that here. So we have a negative 18. Negative 18 is a positive 18. So I have 18 plus or minus the square roots. Negative 18 squared is 324 minus 4 times 1 is 4 times 32 is 128. And then 324 minus 28 gives us an answer of 196. And the square roots of 6 is 14. So I have 18 plus or minus 14 divided by 2. So that will give us two answers. X equaling 18 plus 14 is 32. 32 divided by 2 is 16. 18 minus 14 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So these two would be our answers, 16 and 2. You may work on 2B yourself for extra practice. Example 3, finding the approximate solution. So you're going to start off using the formula, and then you're going to use your graphing calculator to find the zeros. And you'll have to round it to the nearest 10,000th place, which means 4 decimal places. So first one, here's your A, here's your B, here's your C. So if I start plugging them into their formula, the opposite of a -3, plus or minus the square roots of -3 squared. -3 squared is 9, minus 4 times A, which is 5, times C, which is -1, divided by 2A, A is 5 again. So now I have 3 plus minus 9 minus 20, positive 20, is square root of 29, divided by 10. So this is where I have to use my calculator. So I'll get my calculator out, and we're going to plug that in here. So I'll clear what I have here. So I have 3. I'll use parentheses first. So parentheses 3 plus square roots of 29. And then I got to divide this by 10. You notice I have 2 sets of parentheses. So the parentheses after the 9, that's for the radicand. And then the second parentheses is for the whole numerator. So now when I hit enter, it gives me an answer of 0.8385164.807. I need to go 4 decimal places. So it's 8385. The 1 tells us to keep it at 5. So we have one answer being 0.8385. That would be 1. So about. So I used the squiggly equal sign. Now to find the other one, we're going to subtract it. So we're going to do everything the same way. The only difference is we're going to use a subtraction sign. So we have 3 minus the square root of 29 and parentheses divided by 10. This will give us a negative 0.2385164.807. Again, 4 decimal places. The fifth one is a 1. Tells us to keep 5 where it's at. So negative 0.2385. So about negative 0.2385. So these are your approximate answers. You may do the next one yourself for extra practice. And example 4, recognizing the quadratic equation with no real solution. That means you cannot get any value for x. And we're going to try to find out why. So if I put this as A, this is B and C, plug into our formula. So the opposite of 3 is a -3 plus or minus the square root of B squared, which is 9, minus 4 times 2 times 4 divided by 2 times 2. So this gives us a -3 plus or minus 9 minus 32, because 4 times 2 is 8 times 4 is 32. 9 minus 32 is the square root of a -23 divided by 4. Because I have a negative number in as my radicand, you can never find the square root of a negative number. So that's why this is no solution. You can't even go any further than that. So if you find a negative in as a radicand, it's always going to be no solution. You may work on the next one yourself. And then let's go through an application problem. From an initial height of S of 70 meters in a stadium, Luis tosses a ball up at an initial velocity V of 5 meters per second. Use the equation negative 4.9 t squared plus vt plus s equals 0 to find the time t when the ball hits the ground. Now, yes, you can still graph, you could use your calculator to graph it and then find the zeros, but we're going to use the quadratic formula to get practice using it. So I need to substitute 70 and 5 into my equation. So h, the height, equals negative 4.9 t squared plus velocity is 5 meters per second, so 5t plus s, starting height is 70. Okay, so this is all going to equal 0. So instead of the h, I'm just going to put it as equal to 0. This is our a, this is our b, this is our c. So if I plug this in, x equals the opposite of b, so a negative 5, plus or minus the square roots. 5 squared is 25, minus 4 times a, which is a negative 4.9, times our c, which is 70. And this we're all dividing by 2 times a negative 4.9. So now we're going to have to use our calculator to do some of the calculation here. So I have 25 minus, I'm going to do parentheses, I have 4 times a negative 4.9 times 70, and parentheses, hit enter. So I have 1,397. So right now, and then if I find the square roots of that, actually we'll just write this down. So I have x equaling negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 1,397 divided by 2 times a negative 4.9 is a negative 9.8. And when we're dealing with time, we can only use the positive answer. So now let's go back to our calculator. We have negative 5 plus the square roots of 1,397. All this divided by a negative 9.8. That gives us a negative 3.3. That's not going to work because that's a negative time. We can't have negative time. So let's do the other one. So negative 5 minus the square root of 1,397 and parentheses divided by negative 9.8. And this gives us an answer of 4.324128886. Again, rounded to the nearest 10,000ths, so 4 decimal places. So this is about 4.3241. So about 4.3241 seconds. And that would be our time. You may do the second application one yourself. Just to get you started with it, you would just have a negative 4.9 t squared plus vt plus s equals 0. That would be the formula we use to solve this one. Your assignment for next time in lesson 110, numbers 1, 9, 11, 16, and 20.